Now that the MLB draft order is set, it's time to do a mock draft.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster. Thank you for making this your first listen every single day. We're probably part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And this is a special one. We have a repeat guest. Excited to welcome Greg Zumach, writer, co-founder of NorthsideBound.com, covering the Chicago Cubs, but also very prominent MLB draft aficionado, right? Has really great mock drafts on the site, really understands what a lot of the organizations like to do in the draft as far as tendencies. So I wanted to bring Greg in. We're going to do a mock draft. How surprised were you last week when you saw Cleveland and Cincinnati at 1 and 2?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, Lindsay, that was a heck of a lead in here. Obviously, hopefully we rise to the standards upon which you set us for. But thank you. I love being on here. And like you mentioned, this is first listen of the day. I was very surprised. It was funny because I've got a small group of friends that all talk draft and at the time I was just getting messages, Ohio, and then it was back to back. It was crazy. Mm-hmm. And not only that, I know we're going to get to a mock draft, but it completely changes the viewpoint of what those teams can think about doing this winter, which is exciting. And that's the fun of the lottery. So yeah, I'm completely changed the way I was thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean, I was hoping the previous mock I had done could be somewhat useful, and I just had to completely throw it out because this changes everything. And I think the biggest thing is there's so much more money now for teams like Cleveland, like Cincinnati, because they move so far up. And then obviously you're going to have the cascade effects in 25 with who's not allowed to pick in the top 6. But we're going to start off, number 1 overall pick is the Cleveland Guardians. The way we're going to do this, we're going to start off, I'll be odds, Greg's going to be evens, and then we'll swap partway through just, for fun and so we can hit certain teams. So with the number 1 overall pick, this to me feels like the biggest slam dunk of the draft. Travis Bazzana of Oregon State going to Cleveland. Cleveland they like contact ability. They like guys that fit the models really well. They like guys who have gone to the Cape and done well. And when you look at what Travis Bazzana's done, he batted .374, .500, .622. And then he went to the Cape Cod League and not only did well, he won the batting title and the MVP award. Second baseman, has played some outfield. He's going to work on shortstop this year. And school record 36 steals last year. The pop flashed a little bit more in 23. And I think at the MLB level, provided that power continues to develop like I think it can, this is a 2020 bat at the MLB level. Yes, they have a lot of infielders. No position doesn't really matter in the first round. This guy fits everything they want to do. So Travis Bazzana of Oregon State to the Guardians at 1 feels like a slam dunk in this one.
I got to admit, I feel the same way. I think I even tweeted that out that night or posted it or whatever we're calling it these days. And to me, that makes the most sense. I know a lot of people have another infielder kind of also in that mix too. We'll see if that particular player plays a little bit of shortstop this summer, but I saw Bazzana out at Oregon State, was very impressive the last couple of years. So, and I'm excited because you actually left the person that I think is another really, really good pick here. At number 2, the Cincinnati Reds select Nick Kurtz, first baseman, Wake Forest. It's not often that you see first basemen actually stay at the top of the draft, right? Like Torkelson is kind of a really rare situation. Most of the time, they tend to fall down. Teams prioritize defensive position. And, things like shortstop, middle infielder, center field. But Nick Kurtz does everything really, really well. He should be a fairly quick mover. And basically everything offensively and even defensively as at first base, he looks really good. So I think not that you draft for need, but I think just fitting the actual offensive and defensive profiles, I think Nick Kurtz to Cincinnati makes a lot of sense.
It really does. And I've heard a little bit of conversation about they think he could be athletic enough to move to a corner outfield spot. I'm not going to bank on that. Guys moving off of first to tougher positions doesn't always happen, but this Wake Forest team is loaded as far as position players, and so he might be better than your typical first baseman as far as athleticism, but he's been kind of stuck there. This makes it really easy because it's a big three in this class. And so if Kurtz is off the board, Bazzana's off the board, infielder JJ Wetherholt of West Virginia is the logical number 3 pick for the Rockies. It feels like their tendency is just, we're going to go for signability, but when you're in the top 3, it doesn't matter. You pick the one that's left over. Could potentially be the best hitter in the draft. Batted .449 last year, had 16 homers, stole 30-something bags, and it feels like he can go to all fields. He played second base, looking at shortstop this year for West Virginia. And so hopefully they're going to hope he can play shortstop. But even if he's a second baseman, the bat is just so good where you're not worried about the less premium defensive ability.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that makes perfect sense. Right now we're sitting here in December, but it feels like those are the 3 bats, at least in the college group, that have separated themselves a little bit. And the fun of the next few months will be figuring out how wrong we were or how right we were, which we won't really know until July. The next selection is Oakland at number 4. And honestly, I've gone back and forth, and I would not want to be sitting in Oakland's shoes trying to figure out what to select here. They have a really varied draft type of profile. And so I'm actually going to just go here. And this is something I have, gone back and forth on. But I am actually just going to go Seaver King, second baseman / maybe a little bit of outfield. We'll see how that goes. Out of Wake Forest. Again, I promise all my selections are not going to be Wake Forest. But when we compare how Oakland drafted last year with Jacob Wilson, this contact forward type of bat, I think that they look at something similar. Seaver King has a different offensive profile and a different defensive profile as Jacob Wilson, but prioritizing up the middle, which Oakland has done in the draft and Oakland has done in prioritizing in trades that they've made. So this feels really, really rich for Seaver King, to be honest. I'm still a little tempered on it. I think I would personally draft him a little bit later. I just think if we're looking at Oakland's type of profiles, that would be maybe where they would go.
He won summer ball MVP honors in 22, did well in the Cape, did well with USA Baseball. It feels like the safety is there where the floor is high enough to take him that high, especially given that you don't have a slam dunk pick. Chicago, like the White Sox at 5, this is a fun one because it feels like this is the team that's willing to take on risk, right? Like they're willing to they'll take a risky player. I thought about taking a prepster here, but since he's on the board, Jack Caglione of Florida,
there we go.
First baseman and left-handed pitcher, can throw 99 to 100, fastball changeup kind of guy, big frame, 6'5", 245, tons of power, led Division I last year with 33 home runs, but also had some chase out of the strike zone. And so, and his ERA was in the mid 4s. So a little bit risky as a pitcher, a little bit risky as a hitter, but it feels like if everything comes together, and we had a great show a couple weeks ago with Mark Etheridge of D1 Baseball talking about some of the changes Jack has made, it feels like this is a pick or a guy that if the risk pays off, this is a massive upside. So the first two-way player, the most prominent two-way player, Jack Caglione of Florida, going to the White Sox at 5.
Yep, that's a fun one. Saw Caglione in Omaha, and you could see the raw tools. Obviously, still a lot of refinement, but boy, if you're actually looking for a true superstar, that probably is one of the best bats. Or bets in the class, but bats says Freudian slip that fits. There you go. With the 6th selection, the Kansas City Royals are going to be taking a prepster, and there were 3 that I was looking at. I won't spoil the other 2, but I am buying PJ Morlando, who is a first baseman and possibly an outfielder. I think he could potentially do it. A bit looking at the athleticism. I think that he's one of the better prep bats in the class. And Kansas City has not been shy about taking players that they have like a true conviction in, like a scouting belief in. And so just taking the data out of it, but evaluating the actual player and what they look like, I think PGM Orlando is one that scouts, and some of them do, look at and say, we truly love this player, love this person. And so I think he's going to win over a lot in the scouting community. He already has.
Yeah, batted .409 for Team USA in the 18 under team. And there's some folks that are talking about, they think not only could he be an outfielder, that he could probably stick in center if you moved him now. So it feels like a pretty good pick there. And like you said, fits Kansas City's thing of, we fall in love with the guy, we take him. They took a catcher off the board first, and it wasn't the college catcher everybody thought would go first. So it makes sense. When we come back, just real quick, we're going to start off with pick number 7 right here on Locked On MLB Prospects. Back to our mock draft in just a minute, but first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is in full swing. Things are a little bit crazy, but you can score early in the NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app's incredibly easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options: spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL and the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back to Locked On MLB Prospects. We're doing our mock draft. Lindsay Crosby, Greg Zumach of NorthsideBound.com, and St. Louis Cardinals at 7. This is a fun one because it feels like they love outfielders, right? They love outfielders. They love guys with traits. And so it's not really a positional need. There's a little bit of risk to this, but Vance Honeycutt of North Carolina, he was the guy that I had falling when I did the mock last time, and I think I let him fall a little bit too far. Somebody looks like he could be a 5-tool player, but at the same time, he has not batted .300 in college yet. And that's kind of one of those things you always expect to see: a guy batting .300, 20 home runs, 20 stolen bases, the little milestones you look for. He hasn't done it yet. Some of it was the way he was pitched. North Carolina didn't have a lot of protection for him. They were a lot more conservative when they threw to him, and so he didn't chase a ton. He was waiting for mistake pitches over the plate to hit, but the raw power is great. All the tools are there. Vance Honeycutt of North Carolina feels like this is a Cardinals pick because it combines risk and their talent at developing outfielders.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And honestly, Honeycutt was going to be my selection here very soon. So that sounds good. With number 8, with the Los Angeles Angels, a team in transition, but I still think we're going to be looking at quick movers. That's a high priority of the organization. And so I'm actually going to go back to the well for them that they've done before, which is target pitchers with really extreme stuff that should quick move, even if it's just in the pen. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be Brody Brecht, who's a right-handed pitcher out of Iowa. It's supreme stuff. Could be a quick mover, will need refinement. I think him going to like the Angels is going to set off a lot of fireworks in the scouting community who are hoping like he goes to maybe, a different type of organization for development, but he could be a quick mover out of the pen.
Yeah, they like these guys that come from Power 5 programs or high level college baseball programs. They've taken somebody from Campbell, things like that in the past. So that makes a lot of sense. They like fast movers. I think that sets up the Pirates really well at 9 because it feels like they really like the safe future projections. And so Chase Burns of Wake Forest is sitting right there on the board. It's something where transferring from Tennessee to Wake, obviously the Wake Forest pitching lab is well known in the baseball community for being able to develop pitchers, get them to be better. And so something where they're probably going to improve his changeup. I can imagine that. I think the curveball can do a little bit more than it's done. He's been a fastball slider guy, but fastball sits up to 101. The slider's upper 80s, one of those 2 plane breakers. It's always fun to watch. And so depending on how he looks in the spring with the improvements that they've made, it feels like Chase Burns to Pirates would be a good fit of what they like to do, what they need organizationally, and the board right now.
Yeah, that's a perfect one. Honestly, that's really great. I considered Burns actually in the spot with for the Angels too. So I think he, really supreme stuff, could go even higher. Incredible arm to watch. Mm-hmm. So with the next selection, I get to go back to the tool here, the tool belt, if you will, because at number 10, the Washington Nationals are an organization that targets loud tools. We've seen we've seen Dylan Cruz, we've seen others that have just really, really popped. And so while this prep group isn't the strongest, so to speak, there are a few players with supreme tools, and one of them is probably the biggest tools in the class. That is Connor Griffin. Shortstop, outfielder, right-handed pitcher. He kind of does everything, and loud tools will need refinement. But if the Nationals are looking for a star, this is the type of talent that could fall to them.
I was actually looking at Connor Griffin to go to the Tigers with the very next pick. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's not. It makes a lot of sense. And the Tigers is a tough one because Jeff Greenberg taking over, we can't just go off of the previous tendencies the Tigers have taken. But this does feel like a good place, talking about value. A guy, from what I understand, Greenberg does like using the models. Cam Caminiti, the prepster, he's reclassified, so he's going to be young in the models. Two-way player. He's a lefty pitcher as well as an outfielder. I feel like having 3 prepsters in the top 11 is probably a little bit aggressive in this draft, but it just feels like, given that we don't know a ton about what Greenberg's going to do, this is a good selection to give them versatility as well as somebody who should model well. Fastballs in the mid-90s. Looks like he's going to have 3 different, three different good pitches. And then again, the two-way ability playing in the outfield as well. So Cam Caminiti, the prepster, going to the Tigers at 11.
I love it because at number 12, that actually for the Boston Red Sox, this is an organization, again, that's in transition. We've seen Craig Breslow take over as chief baseball operator, whatever his title is there. But he's obviously the leading voice in the organization. He's coming from an organization in which the leading voice doesn't necessarily dictate the draft. So I don't know what his style is going to be, but this is more of a Craig Breslow type pick here. But I'm going to go with Hagen Smith, a left-handed pitcher out of Alabama. He's kind of fun. He's quirky. He's got loud stuff. He's got interesting stuff. This is somebody that the Boston Red Sox can mold and use their revamped, hopefully, pitching development system to accelerate him and have him pitching in the AL East before too long.
Yeah, that was a pick that I was looking at there and kind of makes me have to figure out what I'm going to do now, because I was thinking Hagen Smith would be a good fit for the Giants at 13. It's a really good selection by Boston. And so the Giants don't necessarily, like, they've been looking for the stars, right? They don't necessarily have the stars, the big names, and a couple different options. But I think if you're looking at a big name, you're looking at a guy, I know it kind of goes against some of their models, because their models, they like defenders up the middle. They like arms that have really good traits. But if they're in the business of searching for a star right now, Tommy Tanks is on the board. Corner infielder, first baseman, third baseman out of LSU, Tommy White. It's not the perfect pick. This is probably the one I'd be the most off on if we go back and check this in 6 months. But I'm going to give him to the Giants at 13 simply because it fills a lot of needs for them. It goes outside of type a little bit, but it also kind of plays to the strengths of the board.
Yeah, that's a really, really fun one. This leaves the next pick, the Chicago Cubs, at pick 14. And this is an organization that I know well. They've done a lot of different things with Matt Shaw. They've gone with Cade Horton. I think, just right now, sitting here in December, I'm going to say they go back to the pitching side of things. And I'm actually going to take a name that maybe not kind of expecting here, but a right-handed pitcher out of East Carolina, Trey Savage. Big stuff. 6'4", prototypical build. If you stack him up next to like a Cade Horton, these look like frontline prototypical pitchers, big fastball type of metrics. This stuff is there. I think it's very similar to Horton in the sense that, yes, we're going to take this in the lab, we're going to tweak it. We're going to take this in the lab, we're going to tweak it. He throws even like a change splitter, which the Cubs kind of love, that type of a change up off speed. And so fits that mold of like, we can take this guy and make him a frontline type pitcher. There are a few other hitters on the board that I think would match up really well. Really quick for the Cubs, think, success with like wood bats and all those type of profiles as well. But hey, I'm going Trey Savage to the Cubs at 14.
I put him to the Braves at 24 in my previous mock, and every time they see that, they're like, dang it, that's my sleeper of the first round. I wanted my team to take. So really good pick. Love Trey Savage. I think that's fantastic at 14. What we're going to do, real quick break. When we come back, I'm going to do both 15 and 16 so that we can swap and do on the other order. We'll do that next right here on Locked on MLB Prospects. Welcome back to Locked on MLB Prospects, final segment of the first part of the mock draft. We're making great time. And so looking at 15 and 16, this is the Seattle Mariners and then the Miami Marlins. And the Seattle Mariners, it kind of feels like they have a type. They like those young prepsters that have some upside. You look at, I thought Colt Emerson was one of the best choices in last year's draft. He absolutely raked in Modesto when he got there. That Modesto team with some of these young draftees was phenomenal at the end of the year last year. So it's a little bit tough to figure out which prepster to give them, but Caleb Bonham, the shortstop out of Okemos, Michigan, it's something where he's got plus run times. It looks like he's going to be above average to plus runner. The in-game power has already shown, especially when he pulls the ball, does a lot of that, but it's a really quick, really short swing. So gets in the zone quickly, can send power to all fields. He's done well in showcases against spin. He's done well against off speed. It kind of reminds me, we don't do comps on this show, but it reminds me of a pre-draft Brady House in 2021. Big guy, muscled up, could stay at short, might end up moving to third, but a lot of the guys they took last year profile was more second baseman anyway. So I'm going to send Caleb Bonham to the Mariners here at 15. And then that makes it tough because Miami has a new general manager. And Peter Bendix is going to do things differently from what Kim Ng did. I do feel like the organization, though, they still are big on pitching. They took the top righty and top lefty out of the prep class last year. And so I'm going to go a little bit, I think, out of type here. Levi Sterling, the righty out of California, the prepster, won't turn 18 until after draft day, so the models are going to like him. It feels like Bennett is probably going to do a little bit of that model stuff coming out of Tampa Bay. Slider, splitter, fastball, cutter. It's a good mix of pitches for a young player. He has done some two-way stuff. A lot of prepsters do, but I'm pretty confident he's going to be a pitcher versus a hitter at the next level. And really good athlete. And I think that's one of the things. Miami's good at developing pitchers. The pipeline's a little bit depleted based on where it used to be. So let's send Levi Sterling to Miami at 16.
Yeah, I really like those selections. And I'm just going to toss out here before that, well, Matt Shaw was really, really awesome. If I was sitting there on the draft for the Chicago Cubs, I would have taken Colt Emerson. Again, no disrespect to either of them. I thought they were both stud selections. So I love your path for the Mariners.
Yeah. With Colt Emerson being an Auburn commit, he's a guy that I've actually watched quite a bit of and covered since I was covering Auburn baseball for Sports Illustrated. And the program was incredibly high on him, and all the metrics I saw, he was probably, I think, probably the best prep bat in that entire draft. And the fact that they got him so late is just great.
Yeah, it really was. So for 17, I'm now taking over the odd selections here. The Milwaukee Brewers have done some interesting things, but they take some really good bats in the first round and the comp round. Mm-hmm. And honestly, they had just a really fantastic draft last year in general. But there's a bat on the board that I think a lot of us in the community that follow the draft are kind of wondering and maybe a little bit all secretly high on him. And so maybe it's not a secret anymore. But this is actually a mid-major guy, Mike Sirota, out of Northeastern here. I almost said Northwestern, but it's not Northwestern, it's Northeastern.
I have made that mistake.
Coming from the Chicagoland area originally, I think it's just on the tip of my tongue. But Mike Sirota is a classic, does everything really well up the middle performer. And in many ways, it's kind of like Sal Frelick was in 2021, which is, hey, there's no like elite tool. I think the speed was pretty good, but there's no elite tool. But boy, that's an up the middle player who does everything well. good contact, good offensive profile, probably a center fielder. That just feels like good value. And Milwaukee seems to be prioritizing just getting excellent value selections. Again, kind of stacking those one good decision after another kind of mantra that they built up.
Yeah, I like Sirota. It's kind of surprising that he's fallen that far. And talking about fallers, Charlie Condon is still on the board. I'm not taking him at 18 for Tampa Bay. That's the wild thing. But I just noticed he's still on our boards here. And I feel like he's one of the ones, because of that redshirt year, there's a lot of questions about it. But I'm going to go back to your Wake Forest well for the Tampa Bay Rays. They don't have a general manager right now, but we know that they like their models. A lot of the models also like these Wake pitchers. Left-hand pitcher Josh Hartle. Something where was offered a bunch of money to potentially come out, didn't do it. Just really tall, lean, projectable lefty. 5-pitch mix. None of them are amazing, right? Lives in the low 90s. So a little bit of work to do, but Tampa's done a really good job of taking these guys, adding additional velocity to them. And sometimes you see the elbow injuries that come from that. But I really like the changeup slider tunnel that he has there. It's a sweeper, obviously. That's in vogue right now. And if the stuff ticks up, which I think it could over this season, then he's a pretty good grab as an undervalued college arm. So Josh Hartle of Wake Forest to Tampa Bay at 18.
Yeah, that's really great. And it honestly puts me in a tricky spot with the Mets. They typically try to prioritize those kind of superstar potential players, spend that money, get the best kind of player. Even within the draft slotting, it's prioritizing the top of the draft. We've talked about Condon, and while I think that they would maybe prioritize a different profile, I think that's actually a really good fit here. So I am going to go with Charlie Condon. And no, it's not related to the fact that Pete Alonso is, in his walk year. I think it's more strictly related to the fact that this is a guy that probably should be picked higher in the draft. Mm-hmm. And while we're not going this meta, it's also wouldn't be surprising for like the Mets to actually try to float down money to get a guy that they would have wanted to get at pick 9 had they not been penalized at 10 spaces.
I would not be shocked at all if that's something that they did. That's just that's a kind of common thing. When having all the financial resources they do, you can obviously see them doing that. So unless we pick a guy and just decide to do that, it's hard to kind of estimate and guess what would happen. So that'll definitely happen here. We'll go ahead and do number 20, and then we'll get some thoughts and wrap up this first of the two days of shows here on this. The Toronto Blue Jays at 20. Correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like their kind of big thing that they've always done is guys that fall to them, right? Who has fallen down the board, who you thought would be earlier. They're fine with just sitting back and waiting to see what comes to them. And a guy that a lot of folks are high on, and there's some questions right now about what's going to happen. Braden Montgomery of Texas A&M, formerly of Stanford. Most teams like him as an outfielder. He is a two-way player. If he ends up staying in right field, he's going to have the best outfield arm in this class, because on the mound, he's hit 97, really good cutter, breaking ball, doesn't have the greatest command, so there's questions about can he pitch or not at the next level. But if he doesn't, he's got plus power, he's a really good athlete, and then again, he's going to give you that really good defense in the outfield. And so Braden Montgomery of Texas A&M, formerly of Stanford, to the Blue Jays at 20 feels like it's a pretty good selection based on what they like to do. Question I have for you, Greg, is like so far in this, I guess what's the biggest surprise to you as far as how this board is shaken out? Is it the fact that Condon fell to 19 or?
Maybe. So it's so hard. I kind of went back and forth on it, and I was trying to like piece together what I thought, the draft would be. And there's been a couple curveballs, and I'm sure likewise on your side too. But I would say that it felt pretty standard. What we've seen is generally like players down the defensive spectrum, first baseman, honestly, catchers is kind of this unique class too. Haven't seen any of those. And I don't know if that's surprising. I think that actually kind of jives with what we see. We do these mock drafts, and all of a sudden there's like catchers and first baseman's really high. Nick Kurtz is his own separate thing. And then when we look at it on draft day, they're kind of down a few spots almost consistently, right? Like Kyle Teal, people are like, he could go 3, maybe 6, and then he went 14. And so I think that, I'm looking at it now with where we are on the board. And if something like this happened without knowing the surprises that'll happen in the next 6 months, I'd be like, okay, yeah, like maybe I'm biased, but like I could see that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be, it's always fun to see how these things shake out on draft day. We're going to be back. We're going to finish up starting with pick 21, the Minnesota Twins, on tomorrow's show. In the meantime, Greg, where can folks go to get more of your Cubs writing, your draft thoughts, and all of that?
Great. You can find me on whatever platforms at Ivy Futures. So things like X, Twitter, or whatever, Blue Sky and Threads, I think. I don't know. We're all looking around. But I write primarily for Northside Bound. That's a Cubs site that looks at minor league players in the MLB draft. But my MLB draft coverage is pretty ubiquitous. So I do cover all teams and all players for that. So you'll see a mock draft 1.0 come out in January. It'll be probably a little bit different, a little bit, some of this carried over, but the same kind of concept of looking at team historical patterns, making a guess, and then going from there.
I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. Obviously, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And until next time, remember, it's always a great time to pay a minor leaguer.